first round of the 2024 NFL Draft was yesterday and only a couple minutes ago at the time of recording of this video. And so I wanted to do a quick initial reaction to the first round of the 2024 draft. But before we get into the video, I want to take a quick second to ask you to please subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. It really helps us out. If you're a fan of the NFL, you'll love this channel as we release multiple NFL related videos every Tuesday and Friday all year long. Now, let's get back to the video. So I'm going to start by talking about my general thoughts on the draft and then going into some of the good, the bad, and the uglies. But in terms of general thoughts, this is a massive offensive draft. I mean, we knew going into this draft that it was much better offensive players than defensive players, but this is something completely different that I've never seen before. You did not have a defensive player get picked until the 15th pick of this draft. That alone is insane. But beyond that, you had 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12 of this draft. You've only ever seen 6 quarterbacks go in the draft a couple of times. You've never seen 7 go in the first round, and you had 6 go in the top 12 picks. I did not have 6 players going in the top 12 that were quarterbacks. I didn't even have 6 quarterbacks going in the first round. I knew it was possible, but I was not expecting Michael Penix Jr. to go in the first round. And he ended up going 8th overall, with the 6th quarterback being Bo Nix at 12 to the Denver Broncos. This just shows how much teams are valuing offense in recent years, as well as how much teams are valuing the opportunity to get a top-tier quarterback. The Raiders, who were in the 13th pick, didn't even really have an opportunity to take a quarterback, which somewhat lined up with one of my hot takes that I released in a few videos ago, where I talked about how the Oakland Raiders might not take a quarterback in the first 2 days of the draft. And right now, that's looking pretty likely, given there's no top-tier quarterbacks left after those 6 guys are gone. My other key takeaway is the undervaluing of the cornerback position. I mean, I really thought we were going to see 5 cornerbacks taken in the first round. We only ended up with 3 being taken in the first round. Those 3 being Terrion Arnold, Quinion Mitchell, and Nate Wiggins. Cooper DeJean and Kool-Aid McKinstry didn't even go in the first round, and every single one of those cornerbacks went later than expected. I was expecting the 15th pick to be the first corner taken off the board. That was the first defensive player taken off the board. The first cornerback didn't go until a number of picks later at 22 to the Philadelphia Eagles with Quinion Mitchell. The Lions ended up trading up to get Terrion Arnold at 24, and Nate Wiggins went at 30 to the Baltimore Ravens. But this just seems a bit crazy to me, as cornerback is such a valuable position, basically being one of the most important positions for stopping passing attacks outside of maybe edge rusher. Yet both edge rusher and cornerback seem to be very undervalued in this draft compared to how most people viewed these prospects leading into it. I don't know if it's just that people really want offense over defense or that people just didn't like these prospects, but it was shocking to see how undervalued corners were in this draft. So now that we've talked about the general takeaways, let's head to the good, and the starting point of the good has to be the biggest winner of tonight's draft, in my opinion, the Minnesota Vikings. I hate saying that it's the Vikings as a Lions fan, being a division rival, but they had a great draft. I think a lot of people entered this draft thinking the Vikings were targeting J.J. McCarthy and expected them to need to trade away their number 11 overall pick, their number 23 overall pick that they traded up to get from Houston about a month ago, as well as some other assets just to get McCarthy. Instead, they managed to get McCarthy at 10, only needed to trade a little bit to move up from 11 to 10, and they ended up using the 23rd pick to move up to 17, along with some other assets, to get Dallas Turner, the top edge rusher off the board, who most people expected to go as high as 8th in the draft. And so now you got the best edge rusher on the board, you got your quarterback, and you really probably spent less in terms of total assets than was expected to spend in order to just get J.J. McCarthy. So yes, you had to trade up a bunch to get these guys still. You traded up for the Houston pick, you traded up further to get to 17, and you still traded up to get to the 10th overall pick from the Jets. But it doesn't matter. You got way more value out of those assets than you were expected to get. It's an absolute win for the Vikings, who replaced both Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter, who left in free agency with Dallas Turner and J.J. McCarthy. Yeah, best draft I can think of in the first round is the Vikings. But that doesn't go without an honorable mention to my Detroit Lions. Yeah, I think the Lions had a fantastic draft. Obviously, it's only one pick, but Terrion Arnold, many people thought was the best cornerback on the board. I had him in any mock draft I was looking at and doing going no lower than 15. The Lions were able to trade up to 24 and get the number one cornerback on the board in a position of need. That's always going to be an absolute win. I was praying that we could take Cooper DeJean at our pick or trade up to take Cooper DeJean. We ended up trading up to a position similar to where I expected us to need to get Cooper DeJean and got a better cornerback prospect in Terrion Arnold. This is an absolute win for the Detroit Lions, and so while they aren't the biggest winner, they're still a pretty good winner. Now, let's move on to the bad. The bad is things that aren't great picks, but they're not the worst things that happen. And so I'm going to start with the 49ers selecting Ricky Pearsall at the number 31 pick. We all know the 49ers are considering trading away Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk, or heck, maybe even both. Who knows? But what we don't know is why they took Ricky Pearsall with the 31 pick. They still had Xavier Leggett on the board, Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell, Keon Coleman. You had a ton of guys available at 31, and you went with Ricky Pearsall, a guy who, frankly, wasn't considered to be a first-round prospect at all. I don't think many people even thought of him necessarily as a second-round prospect. And so why the 49ers felt the need to take a guy like this just didn't make a ton of sense. Yeah, this is a good organization. I'm not going to knock them too hard because they do tend to make good picks. But this just didn't make a ton of sense, and this team could have easily traded down and got Pearsall at a different pick for a cheaper price. Similar to what the Buffalo Bills did, trading down twice from 28 to 32, and then again from 32 to the top of the second round, when we all know they're likely targeting a wide receiver, but they're just going to get him a little bit later and a little bit cheaper. It makes a lot more sense. My other bad is going to be the Chargers taking Joe Alt at the 5th overall pick. Now, don't get me wrong. Joe Alt is not a bad player and has the best offensive tackle off the board. Getting him at the 5th overall pick is good value for that player. The problem is that the Chargers already have a stud left tackle in Rashawn Slater. Yes, having a second offensive tackle is not a bad thing. You can play Joe Alt on the right side and be completely fine. But the problem is the Chargers have so many positions of need, and there was so much demand, at least seemingly, for the 5th overall pick from the Vikings, from the Broncos, from the Raiders. So with that being said, why aren't you trading down from this pick, accumulating assets? Heck, maybe even the Giants would have come up at the 6th overall pick. But no, instead of doing that, you decide to take Joe Alt with the 5th overall pick. You don't get additional assets. You aren't able to get a first-round offensive tackle and wide receiver that a lot of people thought was going to be available, especially if you took the Vikings potential trade offer that a lot of people were floating out there. So I just don't know why the Chargers did this instead of trying to trade down. Maybe they did. Maybe there wasn't good value. I don't totally know, but I just don't love this pick for a Chargers team that has so many positions of need and still needs a wide receiver, given Josh Palmer or Quentin Johnson are still their number one options. And finally, let's move on to the ugly. And there's only one big ugly I have, and that's the Atlanta Falcons. I don't really even need to say more than that. I have no idea what the hell the Atlanta Falcons were doing. The Atlanta Falcons, with the 8th overall pick, selected Michael Penix Jr. The 6th ranked quarterback in the draft was the 4th quarterback taken off the board. Most people didn't think he was going to be a first round pick. He ends up going 8th overall to a team that just signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year contract and are supposed to be in win now with a defense first head coach, and they don't take a defensive player when they've spent all this positional assets on quarterback with Kirk Cousins and on, Drake London and Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts in recent drafts. I know that's a lot, but it's just, it's completely confounding. It's completely confounding. It makes absolutely no sense what they're doing with this pick. And Kirk Cousins has come out and said he was shocked with it, and rightfully so. You went to the Atlanta Falcons thinking you want to win with the Falcons. That's why you went there. And what do? They take a player who is not going to contribute to you winning for the next 4 years. At least so long as Kirk Cousins is still a starter. And if Kirk Cousins isn't the starter, that means either A, he's injured, in which case you've wasted a lot of cap on nothing, or B, he's not performing, in which case same thing, or C, you've traded him, in which case you've taken a shit ton of cap hit. None of this makes any sense. None of this works. This is one of the worst picks I've ever seen in recent years in an NFL draft. I literally cannot think of a worse pick than the Atlanta Falcons taking Michael Penix Jr. I was streaming this and literally was dumbfounded for about 10 minutes. Terrible, terrible, terrible pick. Now, this is not an indictment on Michael Penix Jr. Michael Penix Jr. could end up being a very good quarterback. But even if he is, it doesn't totally matter because you ended up wasting a pick on a player that's not going to be useful. Think back to when the Green Bay Packers selected Jordan Love. Now that pick made a lot more sense. Why? Well, first, it wasn't the 8th overall pick, it was the 22nd overall pick. 2, it was not a quarterback that you had locked into 4 years. It was an Aaron Rodgers that was constantly threatening retirement, and you had no idea when he was retiring. If the Atlanta Falcons had taken a quarterback 2-3 years from now, when Kirk Cousins was on his final legs, totally makes sense. But taking at 8th overall a quarterback whose contract until his rookie scale deal is done is going to coincide completely with the Kirk Cousins contract, I just don't know. And so the ugliest pick of this draft and any draft I can remember is the Atlanta Falcons taking Michael Penix Jr. at 8th overall. But that's it for my initial reactions. This is obviously a bit of a raw video. There's no script to it. I've done this completely ad hoc right after the draft. But let me know in the comments if you enjoy this type of video, if you enjoy the more quick cut, off the cuff type of videos, as opposed to the slightly more refined videos that I'm usually trying to release. Either way, we'll be back on Tuesday with a bit more of a refined NFL draft review video. But until next time, peace!